Hello! Welcome to the Mindbuffs Podcast. And if you are watching this on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, this is our first ever video. And I have decided that the best person to shoot our first ever video series with is going to be none other than Kayla Unreal.
It's a big order to fill, but I'm happy to be here.
And we wanted to be doing this new series and having this be the first episode because this is something that every human being, no matter what you do or where you are or how old you are, this is something we are always trying to figure out, understand more, and find more of. So this series is going to be really simple. What is confidence? Kayla, what is confidence?
Well, this is going to take a few episodes, maybe a year to pull apart. Matt and I, in our conversations about confidence, I think a lot of what has come up for me in my practice with clients and then also just in personal life as well is like it just almost feels like this giant elephant in the room, right? Of when we talk about what is confidence, it's such a large topic to be able to actually break down that when I have a client that circles want to be more confident on the intake form, I'm like, okay, here we go. Just because there's so many parts and pieces and we're going to pull that apart together. Yeah.
I think when someone comes to us and that's one of the things that they list as I want to like be more confident, immediately I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is at least a 15 session relationship. This is not going to be something that it's like, here's your hack, here's your tool, here's your easy theory that you just follow these steps and you will finally feel the confidence that you're looking for. It is a very complex scatterplot spider web of a system. And what we want these conversations to do is to try and bring clarity to the things that I actually control that can lead to me feeling more confidence, but also educating you in being able to actually understand everything that is connected to confidence so that not like in an obsessive, like I have to be thinking about these things all the time kind of way, but just for you to be more mindful and aware that like all of these little things combine lead to that internal sense of like believing in oneself fully.
Which I think does two things, in my opinion. I think when you look at it from one perspective, it can be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I have to do all of those things to be confident. But I think when we reframe that, it can also be, I can have impact by focusing on one little thing to be confident.
I love that.
Right? So I think that that's kind of our goal is to be able to pull apart parts and pieces and for each individual to be able to recognize maybe where they want to start to work on the confidence, whether it's like, this is where I feel the most empowered at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. I have the resources at this point in my life, or this is just the area that I feel like is most doable right now until I can actually be able to have accessibility to resources like counseling or a support system that's going to help you work through some of those pieces. I think the other kind of comical thing about confidence is we're sold so many stories about how to become more confident. I don't know how many, but I am assuming there is a list of book titles that give you a step-by-step procedure on how to do this. And in the research that I've done so far, I don't know how they got that step-by-step procedure down.
Where'd they get that from? 100%.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where this podcast is coming from. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about like, why is it important to be confident? And I think we should talk about this a little bit from the research perspective, but also from personal perspective. Okay. Yeah. So the number one thing that pops up into my brain with becoming more confident in your skills and your abilities, I think it's dependent on what's important to you at that point in your life. But for me right now, just being very like career driven, for me, it's motivation and it's a little bit more of like mastery and success related, right? That confidence is coming, obviously transitioning into a different career. That's what's motivating that level of confidence.
Yeah, I would fully agree. For me, like that's how I view confidence. It's when I've made a decision to like care fully about something, to be passionate about something, it means that like I want to be so confident in that skill or that technique or that person I'm in relationship with that like I'm proud of like the quality of my work, the quality of that relationship, the quality of the skill, like the technique, the sport that I'm playing. So when I think of confidence, it's like that internal reminder that like I'm either exactly where I want to be or I'm heading in the direction that I want to be going, and that feeling of like confidence. And we'll we will detail like, what the hell does confidence even feel like? Like that'll be a conversation as well.
Yeah.
But when you know. And yeah, that for me is the addictive quality of like having that feeling of, yes, I'm fully committed to something and every part of me fully believes that I can do this well.
I think that also comes from like having very like performance-based, mastery-based jobs, right? We work with a lot of that client. But I think there's other areas that don't get highlighted as much as to why confidence is important. And here are some of the ones that Google came up with. So one of the biggest ones that was interesting to me was increased health and wellness outcomes. So there was actually some study that I was reading, and it was talking about different patients going in for like quite intense surgeries, and individuals that rated higher on levels of confidence had better outcomes after surgery. Wild.
I know, it's amazing. I feel like there have been several studies that have been done like in medical industry that's looked at belief, positivity, mindset, happiness, joy, things like that as like literally changing neurochemistry in our body to facilitate more rapid and effective like recovery from surgery. Like, oh, so cool.
And then I think there's the other side of it too that we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation, which was a little bit more like increased resilience, increased motivation, increase like self-awareness and ability to have that sense of self. And that is kind of in combination with health, right? But I think those two things, a lot of the times as individuals, we kind of focus on one more than the other. And I think it's important to highlight both sides of that story as to like, why should we practice trying to find how to create confidence for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what we wanted to do today was kind of just break down what goes into confidence. And then with each of those ideas, that will be flushed out in a different episode, right? Because I think in order to go through this really, really fast, we're not going to be able to actually give listeners and ourselves the attention that it should be given in each area that develops confidence in individuals.
Sounds great.
Okay. So some psychologists look at confidence, and hopefully we'll have a drawing for you that will help, on a scale all the way from uncertainty to confidence. So uncertainty is at one end of the scale, and confidence is at the other end of the scale. And this is kind of what we were talking about when we talked a few episodes back on reducing uncertainty, right? So the more confident I am, the farther away I am from feeling those feelings of like anxiousness, not knowing what's going to happen. You have better predictors, you have better confidence in self and your abilities and your skills and who you are as a person. So that's like a very simplified way that some psychologists approach confidence. But concerning in some capacities, in my opinion, because I don't think that we should plot uncertainty at the opposite end of confidence.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one way that I, like, again, oversimplistically describe flow state is either kind of a state of like fully knowing or being okay with not knowing. And as an athlete, we have to be okay with not knowing what the future is. And we get flow state from that because we're just fully accepting of like being in the moment. Whereas like some, like especially more like technical skill based things or like individual sport, like if you fully know exactly what to do to get a good outcome, that's really satisfying as well. And it's really easy to get into flow state when there's like, I know exactly what I need to do to do well right now. But more often than not, it's flow state is more of an acceptance of like, I don't need to know, I'm okay with not knowing. Uncertainty leads to experiences that become kind of doorways to flow state. So yeah, I would say a poo-poo on that theory, and whoever uses it.
I would agree with you. And I also think about like, even either from a personal perspective or in conversations that I've had with other people, is the desire to have confidence isn't necessarily in like situations that are always known, right? I want to be able to walk into a room of people that I don't know and strike up these conversations that I'm unsure what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty there.
Tons. And I think you would mention it in the beginning of the episode about like public speaking, like to 5 people and public speaking to 20 people. It's literally the exact same thing. But if you approach it mentally as like it's a different thing, that uncertainty will definitely get in the way of you getting into flow state because it's blocking the logical truth, which is like, I can do this and have done it before. So what if there's a few more humans in the room?
Yeah.
It's exactly why practice prepare exactly the same way for every game so that you're not throwing any new, either genuinely new or pretend new stimulus variables to your brain and have it go, okay, we got to figure this out. I know what to do. This is different. I must have to do everything differently to play at my best. No.
Cue in later episodes on perfectionism and or control and confidence, right?
Yeah.
The next theory that kind of popped up in my research was separating confidence into two separate types of confidence. And this was most common in literature that was more like organizational psych. So a lot of business-based articles that I was reading, not so much from the very psychology socialistic side. So they explained confidence as two forms, either trait confidence. So I am confident in who I am as a human, and then situational confidence. So those are pretty easy to understand, but we'll dive into them a little bit. Trait confidence is the idea that kind of what we were just talking about, right? I have the ability to believe in myself and who I am and my values, that will show up at any given situation, right? And then the situational confidence is a little bit more I'm in a room of 5 people and presenting. Now I'm in a room of 500 people and presenting. Situation has changed, right? So when we revert back to that scale that we just talked, that we didn't love too much about uncertainty, if we add the word in self to confidence, we can see how that trait confidence probably doesn't vary too much. But that uncertainty confidence is kind of like a scatter plot all over there.
And this is just a random thought that I'm having, and you can science all over this and tell me I'm being an idiot right now if I'm going somewhere strange. But I remember my first recitals playing piano, because I had played Royal Conservatory all the way up until grade 10, where if it was just me and the piano by myself, I had all of the situational and trait confidence in the world to be able to perform that piece of music. And when I would go to recitals, it felt like the lack or the illusion of there being no situational confidence actually got in the way of me accessing trait confidence. I don't know if you had read anything about that, but
no. And I think that's interesting because I'm relating that back to sport performance and sports psych knowledge and the idea of our practice conditions, right? So we talk about how often we want to simulate game situations as much as we can in practice situations so that you can practice that situational confidence, right?
Totally.
Being aware of all of those different variables and being able to manage them.
That's why we train people in detail, in depth, how to fully maximize imagery and visualization, is that you can rehearse situational confidence even if you haven't physically been in that space, that arena, that rink before. But I do think, actually, this is something I want to share. We know that when it comes to trauma, for example, that anytime we've had a traumatic experience, our amygdala really gets in the way, going forward, because anytime it experiences a similar stimuli, similar emotion, similar thought as that major trauma, our brain will make us feel like we're reliving the trauma again because it's similar. So when you look at it from a negative source situation, our brain is really, really, really good at adapting, assuming, or expecting that this different situation is actually the same as these other negative expectations. So inversely, if that's possible, our brain can do that in positive ways. Going back to that public speaking example, if I have spoken publicly in front of 5 people, if I trust that I have enough skill or I have enough competency to do public speaking, then it does not matter how many people are there because the skill itself is the same. So our brain is capable of both the negative and inversely the positive adaptation of being able to go into different situations, but you need to use the exact same skills.
And I'm curious how much you kind of just got me thinking about that is almost a lack of a better analogy, a runaway train effect, right? So I'm going into this room of 500 people. I don't feel confident in speaking in front of them. Situational confidence out the window, right? Now, what about my trait confidence? Am I a good person? Are they going to think that my values are going to show? I'm going to say something stupid and they're going to think that, right? And
yet all of those bags are still behind you, but you thought that you left them on a different train. It's no, it's right there. Just look behind you. Okay. Okay, I still have them.
Well, and I think we'll probably pull this apart in future episodes, but I think that's a very important distinction. I don't feel confident in this moment, but I feel confident in myself.
Yeah.
Can give you at least that stable base to move from, right?
Yeah.
To me, it comes back to that like very values-based, like, who am I? Am I showing up that way? Am I good with that?
Yeah.
Aside from this specific situation is something that I'm comfortable with.
And this is where, like, it's one of, I think, the most widely shared kind of psychological, psychoeducational mindsets, like in industry, is you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. You know, I had done a little interview on CBC last week where they were asking me about this comment that the Edmonton Oilers goaltender Skinner had made about, he was actually sharing a quote from another goaltender named Marc-Andre Fleury. And he had said that, you know, some days I wake up and I feel like crap and I practice like crap. And even in the 10 minutes leading up to the game, I feel like crap, but then I have the best game of my entire life.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when it comes to confidence, it's like, if I feel that I'm not confident, if I feel bad, if I have negative thoughts, I will not play well. I won't perform well. Nope.
Not true.
Not true at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of talked about two initial theories a little bit. So we talked about that continuum from uncertainty to confidence. Take it or leave it. We talked about separating it into trait versus state or situational confidence. Yeah. But one of the things that I think we need to talk about today and kind of pull apart a little bit, and then I think each one of these will probably have their own episode in themselves.
Yeah. Like I said, we're going to have a lot of episodes on this, guys.
Yeah. Is when I think of self-confidence, that's the end game, right? And so I was sitting there researching and I found myself like literally sitting there trying to come up with a formula for confidence. I'm like, well, if A plus B equals plus time, right? And so I was sitting there and then all of a sudden I had this moment that I was like, oh my gosh, I am doing exactly what I get frustrated with when other people ask me how to become confident, is trying to find this very simplistic formula to give to you or to be able to present with. If you just do these 5 things, then you'll be there. But I'll tell you what was part of my formula, but I don't think that it's something that is as easy as I've laid it out to be.
Yeah, 100%.
You can laugh at me.
Yeah,
it's okay.
So let's see what you got, Kayla.
So we're going to start with the outcome, right? So self-confidence. What is it? So confidence comes from the Latin word conferde, which is to trust. So when we think about self-confidence in really short terms, it's the trust in oneself, right? One definition that I really liked was to trust in one's ability to engage successfully with the world.
Say that again.
To trust one's ability to engage successfully with the world.
I love that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully, your brain is already pinging with all of the different ideas about how am I engaging? Internal process, external process, skills, abilities, relationships, all of these different things are playing into that engagement.
Because when you don't feel confident, most people's brains will suggest the strategy of isolation to not engage with the world. Mm-hmm. That's where I went. Deep.
I'll do the opposite. This will work out well for me, right? So that's kind of our end goal, is to be able to figure out how can we engage successfully or how can we engage with the world around us, right? Some theories look at, and I'm curious to have your opinion on this, some theories think that confidence is how you project yourself to others. So it's kind of the shell to all of the other things, we'll call them, that are bouncing around on the inside. And the things are what we're going to talk about.
Right. I hate fake it till you make it. It's one of my least favorite sayings in the world. But I will give it a small degree of legitimacy. I think we can all think of that person in our life that we believe has it all together. Mm-hmm. They have the perfect life. Stress never gets to them. Like, oh my God, like you're so strong and resilient. Like, how do you do it? And then internally, it's just like confetti's popping off like every 2 seconds, just wild anxiety and self-doubt and lack of trust. But there's like this external expression of like, no, like it's okay. I think as a leader, there are times where we have to do that. I think that's why you look at certain coaches and it appears as though they have no emotion, that they're just robotic, that their wall or something is getting to them. But the importance of that is that when you're a leader, people are always looking to you, and you never know when they're looking to you or directly at you. So by hiding all of those things, at the very least, you're not sending a negative feedback response to the athlete, to the kid in class, to your own child, that like something's not okay.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously there are situations where we have to teach our athletes or kids or students that like, I too am feeling that this is not okay, and it's okay that none of us are not okay. But I believe that there is merit in situations where we know there's going to be challenges, ups and downs, blockades, where I will at least on the outside show that this is not getting to me, so that I can make other people around me feel like it's okay, we can keep moving forward. But other than that, I believe that it is a very inauthentic way of
moving through the world.
Exactly.
Well, and I think too, to what you're saying is if we looked at confidence as like something that's encompassing all of these different aspects of self, that you're right, situationally, we can probably put on this external like view or this external like show that we're confident. But through time, if we don't have what we're going to talk about in a second, self-esteem, that starts to poke holes in it. And specifically with individuals that are intuitive, we can see through the shell quite easily.
And like there are lots of different modalities that psychologists use, like in therapy, lots of therapists use different kinds of tools and strategies, and not all of them can work together, because you've got some that are, I'll just use kind of CBT as an example, that they kind of full-heartedly believe that behavior changes thoughts and feelings, that if we just change our behavior, then, you know, the positive change we are looking for will follow that behavior. And then there are other modalities where we understand that the behavior will always be like skimming the surface of that subconscious part of you that will never be able to change simply by changing behavior. So we actually have to do the inner work and change the internal narratives of how we view ourselves and the world. So we are understanding the brain more and more every single day. We're not perfect. We don't have, these theories are not set in stone yet, which is why Kayla is like sharing different theories, because maybe there's one that you connect to more and one that your coworker or your athlete connects to more than the other one. So we want to just show the availability of theories that are out there and kind of give more that broad scope.
I almost relate this back to like, I told you that self-confidence is in theory, if we were putting it into an equation, an unfinished equation that I'm not even confident in yet, is the outcome. As sports psychs, we tell you not to focus on the outcome. We tell you to focus on the process, right? So that's the point I think that we're about to get into is what are the parts of the process? So let's take some time focusing on the process instead of focusing on like, I want this outcome of this piece of confidence, right?
Right.
Really, that's something that comes with all of the other parts and pieces that come along the way.
Right.
So two of the biggest ones that I wanted to talk about today relate back to that original theory that we were talking about with situational confidence and trait confidence. So the first one that we'll talk about is situational confidence. Situational confidence is the exact same thing, is a very psychological term, not so psychological term, called self-efficacy. So self-efficacy, by definition, is context dependent and refers to how you feel about your ability to succeed or influence events in your life. Situation specific, right? So like you had said, I can feel comfortable in front of 5 people, can't feel as comfortable in front of 50 people or 500 people, right? When we talk about this in relation to sports and performance, I can feel confident in my ability to do a certain aspect of my game, but I don't feel as confident when it's raining or when, when I'm playing against the best team in the league.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the self-efficacy part of it.
Yeah.
When we spend some time breaking that down, there's some theories that go into that that we'll talk about in future episodes. But self-efficacy really is I think all of the tools, the resources that you have available to you, all of those parts and pieces that you can use in those situations specifically.
I think that this is the one, and correct me if I'm wrong, the one that we're kind of most in control of is, am I actually putting in the time to like improve, rehearse these skills so that I can just access them in flow state without having to think, right? Practice does not make perfect. If you're still someone that uses that or knows someone that uses that, tell them that it's practice makes progress. Fuck perfectionism, okay? And I'm sorry if you're a researcher listening to this and you spent your entire life on trying to better understand perfectionism. It's toxic. We are looking for progress. So I think self-efficacy is all about like, what are the things that I can do that I fully control to increase the chance that I trust myself in different situations? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think of it as almost like what tools or what, it's almost like when you put it into like video game terms, and you're going to have to do a little bit of a better analogy because mine's going to be trash, but it's like, what like weapons am I taking with me? What skin am I putting on? Like, what are the different things that I need to predict that I might need in the future for this specific situation in order to use transferable skills in that moment?
Self-efficacy is a skill tree. Yeah. It's also like in Zelda, it's certain skills are kind of gate kept before you progress far enough into the story. Then you can go back to earlier parts because you have the new skill that you can use to unlock that area or unlock that dungeon or something. So yeah, I would say self-efficacy is our skill tree.
Yeah. And I think that deserves some breaking down because like you said at the start of the episode, there's so many parts of confidence that it can feel overwhelming. But when we can pull apart each one of these small tools and we can look at some of the barriers that may be getting in the way for each of us, that actually creates a significant amount of, I can actually affect change here. It's not this giant mountain that I need to climb up.
Yeah.
Well, it might be, but you can at least see the first step, right? And so that's self-efficacy. So that's one big circle inside the big circle of self-confidence. The other one is self-esteem. So self-esteem is just our emotional appraisal of our own self-worth. What do I think that I am worth? Okay. So its definition is a stable belief about one's overall self-worth and who you are.
Acceptance of self, like it can go on and on, like of all the different ways we can look and examine that. But I think like anyone could study, understand, access help from people to improve like self-efficacy. But when it comes to like self-esteem, I do feel like this is where sport and performance psychologists are like most adept at helping athletes. High performance is in the self-esteem part, is actually more that inner work of like what's getting in the way of me truly believing in myself and truly trusting myself. So this part is where most of the work, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be for people to try to find more consistent confidence.
I think most of the difficult work.
Yeah.
The time-consuming work, right? But I think that there's seasons, and I think it's important to recognize that is this a season that I'm working through finding some self-efficacy, and I'm working through my tool tree, or my
skill tree.
Or is this the season that I'm working through that self-esteem piece?
Yeah.
And I think when we dive into self-esteem, we need to highlight some indicators of when it is the right time to kind of pick that apart. When do we feel like we're in a good place to be able to do some of that work versus maybe when it's not? Yeah.
Most people, although a little bit different for us than the rest of our colleagues, just like in the psychological industry, we get lots of people coming here when, they're not drowning, that they just like, I see something coming or I want to learn things to prepare me for this big thing I have coming up, which is fantastic. But most people wait until the worst case scenario has happened before they start working on the self-esteem part. It is a lot easier to do like deep therapeutic work when you're feeling good. It's a lot easier. So if you know that, situationally things in life are just good right now, that's the time, that's the window. Like start examining and exploring those things in that space. It'll take less time and it'll be less difficult to make any of those internal changes that you need for when inevitably that next difficult struggle comes along, because that's life, baby.
And I think good in terms of like, do I have a secure base to be able to explore some of these things, whether that is internally within your community, within whatever systems that you have too. Matt's not saying that everything needs to be cheerful in order for you to come in and do some of this work. It's more the idea that like, can I start to explore some of these things and experience the discomfort and still be able to move through my day-to-day experience?
Yeah, because one of the most frustrating things that I find when it comes to the brain is that our brain intentionally starts to believe negative things of self as a form of protection. And we can get into that in much greater detail in other episodes. But if you've been listening to our shows up until this point, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about already, that our brain is always trying to help us, even though it feels like it's self-sabotage. It has a reason. We might not consciously be aware of it yet, but there is some reason as to why, as a golfer, right before I hit the ball, some part of my body's like, nope, disagree, bad idea, abort.
Yeah.
There is some silly, protective, irrational meaning behind why our body, our brain is like sabotaging us in that moment. So there's nothing wrong with you. There's something from your past that your brain misread or is holding on to for dear life for way too long that I'm telling you will be 10 times easier to work through with a therapist than your partner or your best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that kind of sums up the first idea and episode of where we're starting is we would like you to come along with our little journey here of not necessarily just focusing on the outcome of self-confidence, of us sitting here telling you, here's all of the 15 steps in order for you to get this self-confidence, but discussing topics along the way that relate back to self-confidence. We've highlighted two, I think, really important ones, self-efficacy and self-esteem, right? But also in there, we're going to mix in a little bit of like motivation. We're going to mix in some self-sabotaging. We're going to mix in all of these different topics that come up related to self-confidence. And just recognizing for yourself along that process, which of these are likely the ones that are most difficult or my largest hurdles to that outcome.
Yeah, I think one of the hopes that I have for those watching and listening is that you can increase the amount of artificial wins you create for yourself, because a lot of wins in life, they happen, right? And we have to relish and celebrate and just enjoy those moments when it comes. But like part of these conversations, like why we want to have them for you guys is that you can begin to see like the things that you can start changing, manipulating like in your ecosystem so that you're increasing the chance of those wins like happening, because wins just always feel amazing. But just understand that confidence, as you said a couple of times, is a destination. It's an outcome. It's something that we get to feel, get to play with if a whole bunch of other things have happened beforehand. So it is not a light switch. You can't just tell yourself like, I'm going to play with confidence today. As you've seen, confidence is too big, it's too broad, it's too complex. Your brain's not going to go, oh, I know how to do that, and then change every single switch on the switchboard so that our brain is recalibrated the way that we want it to be. It's not a switch. It is a result of doing a lot of work and having a lot of good habits and the right people and like on and on and on. There's a lot going on here.
And I almost think of it too, like if someone were to sit down and ask me if I feel confident, my answer would be like, yeah, for the most part. But it's a very like, I need more to that question to be able to give you a definite answer, right? Yeah. And I think that's important because that means that we're still being curious about the areas where we can maybe grow.
Right. So again, I hope this isn't disheartening that like, sorry, bud, it's going to take a long time to feel confident. It's more like, give yourself some slack. Like confidence isn't something that everyone should be feeling at all times, nor is it an easy destination to arrive at. It's just a lifelong process of if I continue to design my life in a way that optimizes the things that I am most passionate about, I'm going to feel more confident about myself and the things that I do. So yeah, I hope that you're buckled in and you're excited for this ride. Please ask us questions. We are going to do 8, 10, maybe even 12 episodes on this. So if there are particular curiosities that you have about like, what's this, what's that, like is confidence like this, or have you thought about that? What's this theory about? Yeah, just comment in the sections below. And then we love bringing in other people's ideas into the conversations we have so that we're engaging with you and bringing in more practical, relevant experiences that you guys are having. So yeah, really looking forward to diving into this with you. And yeah, I think it's important that this is the first series that we really look at on our video series. So I'm excited to be doing this.
Me too.
Right on. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.